Hello, everybody. I'm Jeff Scarlatta from Beyond the Range, and we have retired U.S. Marshal Charlie Moore on the call again for us today. Today, Charlie, we're just doing a quick little update on one of the calls that we did just a few weeks ago, and we called it the New York City Chokehold, where a bystander basically put somebody into a chokehold and ended up causing the death of that individual.
Right.
And we were talking on the last call about how probably the next thing coming was an indictment. So I think it was about a week after we had that previous call, this indictment came through. If you are just joining us on YouTube for the first time, I will put a link to our first video below in the description. If you want to watch that to kind of see where it kind of got to this point to understand why we thought an indictment was coming, then you can watch that video as well. So Charlie, let's talk about this. So tell me about what's going on with this New York City chokehold case.
Yeah, Jeff, good. Again, thanks for the invite, and appreciate the opportunity to kind of update the folks on what's going on with the case that you and I had just mentioned, the Daniel Penny case there in New York City in the borough of Manhattan. Just a short recap that Daniel Penny on May 1st allegedly choked and killed Mr. Jordan Neely, who apparently or allegedly came on, was acting hostile and erratic. But I've seen, and you and I were just talking, I've seen nothing in the news or anything I could find that he had made any physical contact with anyone. It was just acting, hostile, erratic, displaying maybe a mental health issue or something like that. And that Mr. Penny had come up behind him and put him in a, you and I in jiu-jitsu would call it a rear naked choke, or what they commonly termed a chokehold. And unfortunately, Mr. Neely passed away. So in our last call, as you mentioned, that happened on May 1st, sometime around June 13th or so of this year, obviously, the New York grand jury indicted Daniel Penny, as you and I had spoke to before, that we thought was coming, on 2 charges. The 2 charges being, I have them right here in my hand, manslaughter in the 2nd degree, which is the New York State Penal Code 125.15 sub 1. And then the second charge, and we'll talk a little bit here in a second on why there's 2 charges, is again New York State Penal Law, or Penal Code 125.10, which is criminally negligent homicide. And people are often asked, and maybe some of our viewers are wondering, well, why are we charging him twice? Why is this overkill, if you will? It's kind of a legal tactical thing to do when you're going to trial. We call it a lesser included offense. Is manslaughter in the 2nd degree in New York, up there where you are, Jeff, carries a 15-year maximum penalty. It's a C felony. It requires to prove that someone had acted recklessly. I'm here reading my notes out of the penal code. Is acting recklessly, as defined in New York, is when a person is aware that his conduct poses a substantial or unjustifiable risk. And in this case, it resulted in the death of another. The second charge we mentioned, Penal Code 125.10, criminally negligent homicide, by contrast, is a Class E felony, which has a 4-year maximum, which only requires the DA in Manhattan, in this case, to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Penny caused the death of another, this being Mr. Neely, with criminal negligence, meaning he failed to perceive that substantial and unjustifiable risk. So the only real difference, Jeff, for our viewers, is in the 2 charges is, if they can't convict him on one, they can always convict him on the other, meaning, the jury can choose one or the other. So one of them has to do with his alleged mental state, his being Mr. Penny's. So that's kind of where we're at. I understand the next court appearance is October 25th. That sometimes can be changed by agreement from the parties based on discovery and speedy trial things and such legal things like that. So that's kind of where we're at with the Penny case. And, I appreciate the opportunity to get with you and update the folks on that case.
Yeah, and I think this was an important update that we had to do, because when we did the original call on this Penny case, we did it as a live call. It was an open forum call. And a lot of people were wondering just totally at all, like, why would he even be charged? He was in fear for his life. He was this and that. And we had talked about that the guy who passed away was making threats. Yes, he was making verbal threats, but he wasn't actually taken action with any of those threats. There's no video that's been released, whether it's been a personal cell phone or a train subway camera, a subway camera, anything like that, that proves that this guy was actually carrying out any of those threats.
Right.
So you kind of felt that he was going to be charged with something, or at least get indicted with it to kind of take it to the court to see what happens. So, Charlie, for some of our viewers that are brand new, what does an indictment mean?
An indictment means that up to 23 people, 16 to 23 people, if my numbers are correct, in the state of New York we're talking about now, is a grand jury. The grand jury is basically a jury that is going to decide whether the prosecution, and it's a one-sided thing. It's not a, as you call it, an adversarial thing where you have a defense and a prosecution. It's a prosecution giving the case to the people. They make a decision on whether they believe, based on what the prosecutor presents, that the person that they're naming, and in this case, Mr. Penny, there's probable cause to believe that he is the one that committed the act in charge. In this case, the material evidence, I'm sorry, the evidence presented led the grand jury to indict Mr. Penny on the two charges that we just talked about. So that's how it kind of does it. It kind of, I'll just use the word, circumvents the need for a preliminary hearing, which is the other avenue that prosecutors have to use by procedure law or procedure code, is preliminary hearing to determine probable cause, or an indictment by the grand jury, which is what happened in this case. And Mr. Penny didn't testify. That is not unusual for a defendant not to testify in the grand jury. However, the other case we're going to talk about, the subject did. So it's kind of unusual, but we'll talk about that.
So in this one, in this particular case, the jury basically says, well, or the panel basically says there's enough evidence to say that we should take this to court and to see how it unfolds from there, basically.
Yeah, I believe, like I said, it's a one-sided thing. There's a saying that's been around since I've been in 4 decades around, is you can indict a ham sandwich because you're just getting one side of the case.
Right.
As we know, there's two sides of things, and somewhere in the middle is probably the truth. When we use that analogy, but yeah, the grand jury said there's probably and then they go in front of the jury of peers. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
We had a blink in the internet, so we lost you on that whole last sentence. You said the grand jury felt
that Mr. Penny in this case had there was probable cause to believe that he was the person that committed the act presented by the grand jury, thus their indictment. And now he's held over for trial, which his next court appearance, according to what I was just reading online before we got on, is October 25th, but that's subject to change based on discovery, speedy trial.
So we have this one case that this guy, without a weapon, puts somebody in a chokehold, causes the death of him, gets indicted. In the same state of New York, on a subway
across the bridge,
there's another case of somebody who used a weapon, but no charges were filed. So let's kind of do a quick comparison of the two, so our viewers can understand of why one was charged or indicted, why one wasn't.
Right. It's kind of let's agree. There's both of them are tragedies for everybody involved. You and I talked about it, and I'm not going to talk about the politics, if there is any, or anything of that nature. It's just we're talking about the law and what we know that allegedly happened. Neither one of us was there. I know there's other videos from the train. You and I were talking about it. This is on the Penny case, some other things, just so there's a lot more out there than what we have. We're going by what we had now, so you guys can know. The second case is a gentleman named Mr. Jordan Williams, not to be confused with Jordan Neely, who is the deceased in the first case. Jordan Williams was on the J train in Brooklyn around the same time, ironically, that the indictment of Mr. Penny came out. Allegedly, Mr. Williams is on a train, the subway, with his girlfriend. A gentleman, the deceased, named D. Victor, and I cannot pronounce his last name. It's Ouedraogo. For those of you who want to look it up, Ouedraogo. He allegedly got on, verbally harassed the passengers of the subway train, such as similar to what we were just talking about in the Penny case, But in this case, according to the grand jury testimony of Mr. Williams, who did testify, according to the articles that I've read, that he got on acting erratically, possible displays of mental illness or anger at least, same as it appears to be the same as Mr. Neely in the Penny case. This one is a little bit different based on what's out there. Is he harassed passengers, but he also placed one man in a chokehold allegedly on the train, and then walked up to Mr. Williams, Jordan Williams, and punched him and his girlfriend and grabbed one of them around the neck. Mr. Williams responded by stabbing the gentleman, I can't pronounce his name, the deceased, in the chest. And sadly, he passed away. Mr. Williams was arrested that night. His case was presented to the grand jury in Brooklyn. That grand jury decided that based on whatever the prosecutor put forward, that Mr. Williams hadn't committed a crime, and they no-billed him, which basically means in non-legal terms, they decided that there wasn't enough evidence to determine probable cause to charge him, basically. So two very, very similar cases. Two sadly ended up with the death of two people. Kind of started the same, but there are some apparently subtle differences that we wanted to talk about.
So the first case, no weapon involved,
right,
but no physical contact by we'll call it the aggressor at the time.
Okay. That appears to be the case, correct? Right.
The second case, a weapon wasn't involved to defend himself, and there was physical contact of a threat already being made and done by the aggressor at the time. So if there is a nice thing about this, it's like you said, it's sad. The nice thing is it's in the same state. So we don't have two different states and the law being different. It's going to be under the same laws, same jurisdiction, basically, and things like that. So we can look at this for those of us that are in New York State and say, if you have to defend yourself, even without a weapon, you still have to be justified. All right. And there's going to be things that have to be able to talk about. Now, that Neely case, the first case, may still come back that there was some kind of physical assault or something. We don't know. Like you said, we're only going by what we're told at this time. So that may come back that guy, Neely, is justified in what he did. But at this current time, there's no evidence proving that there was that physical attack by the aggressor, where in the second case there was.
Yeah, when we go back and kind of, you've got to delve into the legality of what was charged. Did he act recklessly when he should have known that chokehold that you and I have taught others and practiced had the potential to cause that, or did he not know that but still caused it, thus being negligent in not knowing that? There's some, as we mentioned, and I think we're going to talk about this, and if not, we're going to talk about some workshops where you should study the law and not talk. There's some alleged statements by Mr. Penny, and there's some documentation that I found from the court about holding him and what he was doing and things. And now they're memorialized, if those are accurate, which I have no reason to believe they're not, that are going to follow him now through the whole criminal proceeding. And some things that you do spontaneously and start uttering things after such an event, may be beneficial to you and may come back to bite you. So we're going to talk about that. But it's kind of sad, ironic that we have to talk about both of these things, but happening in the same state, like you said, of New York, under the same penal code, under the same criminal procedure law, just basically across the bridge from Manhattan to Brooklyn.
Right.
Two sad outcomes, two deaths, one person indicted, one not indicted. And it goes to show you that, any use of force, especially lethal force, it requires, as you said, the ability to articulate your actions. Cliches aren't going to help you. Emotions aren't going to help you. Factually, what caused you to do what you did? And, different than when I started back in the early 80s, everything is on video. There's subway cams, there's videos, as you said. So, if you don't have a video, somebody else does. So it's even more important to know your facts, know the law, and know what you can do, and know that you naturally, can do it. So it's very important. I can't stress how much important it is.
All right, well, let's keep this on our radar. Let's see what happens. Let's watch both cases. And if there's anything that changes with it, we'll do another quick call. We'll update on it. But Charlie, as always, thanks for being on the call today. And we look forward to you coming up here and training just in a couple of weeks. I'm excited for that. So we'll talk about that another time. But thanks for your call today, Charlie. Appreciate it.
Jeff, take care now. Have a good day.